Would you sacrifice your honor to marry a duke? Today Reven will tell you the story, Betrayal of Dignity. One bright sunny day, in the forest, there was a horse carriage running. The girl gently reminded her younger sister, "You absolutely cannot make a scene this time, Alice. Do you understand?" The girl named Alice replied, "But that last soiree was just so incredibly dull. I couldn't help it." This is Alice Verdier, the second daughter of Viscount Verdier. Alice shrugged innocently and added, "And how was I know a few glasses of sherry would get me so tipsy? Anyhow, I'm certain this time will be much more lively. What with you there?" The girl suddenly smiled. Alice continued, "You agree, don't you, Chloe?" "I am being sincere," Chloe Verdier replied. She is the eldest daughter of Viscount Verdier. Since childhood, she have had a disability in her legs, so walking has some difficulty. Chloe added, "You really have to behave yourself this time. This ball is hosted by none other than Duke This. You have to find yourself a potential suitor." Alice interrupted, "I know, I am well aware that my betrothal is the only thing that can save our family from drowning in debt. Still," she hesitantly continued, "I've always hoped to find someone who would sweep me off my feet." Alice sighed. Chloe looked at her sister with sad eyes and guilt. Chloe replied, "I'm sorry, Alice. If only my leg wasn't in such a state." Alice shook her head at the self-reproach, even though it was not her fault at all. Chloe thought to herself, "I wish I didn't have to place such a heavy burden on my younger sister. This is all my." Meanwhile, Alice stood up. She ran to her beloved sister and softly called, "Chloe, what could you possibly have to feel sorry for?" She hugged her sister tightly and said, "If anyone is to blame, it is our father for loving mother so much that he spent his entire fortune on her medical bills and completely failed to manage his." Alice scolded her father with a smile. "Think of what happened 3 years ago. Despite our family's precarious circumstances, he allowed Duke This's army to use our castle." Chloe was startled when her sister mentioned Grand Duke This. Alice continued, without noticing Chloe's wistfulness, "He may be our father, but I can't tell if he possesses a heart of gold or if he's just a fool. Have you heard the rumors about Duke This? None of them are good," Alice said with an annoyed. "Grand Duke This is a hero who has contributed to his country, a person known for being cold-blooded and cruel." Alice scoffed. "A young duke who led his soldiers to great victory? Don't make me laugh. Word has it that he's fathered several illegitimate children with his mistresses, only to have them executed in secret. He's also said to have a horrible temperament. If you get on his bad side, he will completely ruin you, regardless of any title you may hold. Many seem to think it'd have been better if he'd perished in battle." Suddenly, Chloe interrupted Alice. "Alice, considering our family's standing, we're lucky to have even been invited to this event." Alice replied, "Even so, he's not the kind of person we should be associating with. There are ominous rumors floating about, and we have no idea what his intentions are." Alice continues to whine, "I just hope we don't run into him while we're enjoying the lantern. Oh, but I suppose we will have to greet him since he's the host." Hearing this, Chloe was full of thoughts and sorrow. She thought to herself, "You cannot allow yourself to be afraid, Chloe." Verdier estate 3 years earlier, Viscount Verdier, the lord of a small castle, gladly opened the gates for the imperial army as it retreated from battle. A girl with a cane limps through the snowy winter sky. There was a buzz of discussion around. "So it is true, Viscount Verdier's eldest daughter is a cripple," another replied. "How is she to attend to anyone in such a state?" Someone added, "Won't she just be in the way?" Chloe tried to pretend she didn't hear those rumors. Someone spoke up, "Leave her be. The cripple just wants to help." Chloe gives first aid to injured soldiers. This scene was observed by someone standing far away. The older man spoke up, "I've no complaints. She's a right feast for the eyes, that one." The other person replied, "Yea, her face to be decent at least." Night fell again at Viscount Verdier's castle. In front of Chloe's room, the servant said, "His lordship has requested you leave the wounded in the care of the servants." Chloe replied, "I understand." Sitting absent-mindedly on the bed, Chloe thought, "Did I cause father to worry? Still, I imagine the pain they are experiencing must have them feeling on edge." Outside, although night had fallen, the fire was still red, and the soldiers had not yet gone to sleep. Chloe curiously approached the window and thought to herself, "I was always taught it is the duty of the nobility to come to the aid of the destitute and the infirm." There was a loud voice shouting, "Attention!" Chloe was startled. Someone approached and shouted, greet your commander. A man with platinum hair is standing solemnly in front of his army. Chloe thought in amazement, that's the commander? Earlier today I received news of my father Wilhelm von Thys's passing. He was beheaded by the enemy who has chosen to display his head on their castle walls. Suddenly the Grand Duke spoke up and pointed at a soldier. Do you wish to return home? The soldier was startled and afraid to look at the Grand Duke. Before he could speak, this added, it doesn't seem like you do. The startled soldier stammered in response, no sir, I do. My wife recently gave birth to our child without me by her side. I wish nothing more than to see the two of them. And you? The Grand Duke asked another person. He replied, I worry for my mother whom I had to leave sick and alone at home. Another person spoke up. I must work to support my young brother so he doesn't starve. Another person said, my betrothed awaits my return. Standing high up witnessing this scene, Chloe sadly thought, I can hear the anguish overflowing in their voices. The Grand Duke continued, speaking in an authoritative and sympathetic tone. As you can see, there are countless reasons why we must end this war and return to our homes. The same goes for me. I haven't been able to recover my father's body, let alone hold a funeral to put him to rest. He continued to reassure the troops. However, we must remember that it is not through God's will that a war is won or lost, which is exactly why I refuse to back down. I shall do everything in my power to lead my soldiers to victory. His voice filled with determination, the Grand Duke emphasized, after all, this is a matter of house, this pride and dignity. That's right, this man is Damien Ernst von Thys. End of chapter 1. Chapter 2 begins. I shall do everything in my power to lead my soldiers to victory, the Grand Duke continued to speak. Damien Ernst von Thys, Chloe thought to herself about that name. The Grand Duke finished with the last sentence to reassure the troops. It is now up to you to transform all of the desperation and longing you just showed me into action. Then came the cheers of determination from the army. Chloe on the window saw that scene and secretly admired. He managed to boost the soldiers' morale in an instant. The soldiers all hailed the name Thys. Suddenly, he felt like someone was watching. The Grand Duke glanced up at Chloe's window. She was startled when she saw those eyes directed at her. Chloe immediately sat down and hid behind the window. Did our eyes just meet? Chloe thought worriedly. She secretly looked back to see if he had left, and saw the cheers of the Grand Duke's army turning and leaving. Chloe up here breathed a sigh of relief. I would never be able to do something like that after hearing of my father's passing, she thought sadly. Then Chloe silently prayed, please, allow those soldiers to return home, so they may look after their loved ones, that their languish may bear fruit in battle. She didn't know that down here, the previous Grand Duke was still looking up at her room window with many thoughtful thoughts. A beautiful sunny day at Viscount Verdier's castle. Chloe secretly looked around. Is no one out yet? I should hurry and get back before everyone wakes up. Suddenly there was a voice calling, Lady Chloe? It turned out to be Chloe's close servant Jill. Startled by the call, Chloe couldn't hold her cane firmly. She cried out and was about to fall. But luckily the other guy quickly caught Chloe. She said with relief, you saved me. After speaking, Chloe suddenly smiled brightly, making the servant a bit confused. Finally, the guy also spoke. Where are you headed so early in the morning? I believe it was only. Before she could finish speaking, Chloe spoke up. I'm going to gather some medicinal herbs from isn't becoming of a noblewoman, especially one of your condition." Chloe seemed dumbfounded when she heard the heavy words. The Duke said, "Is this the same man I saw yesterday?" She thought in frustration. "How disrespectful." Chloe replied loudly, "I was only trying to help those who had set out for war to protect their families. I did not expect my title to become an issue. My late mother taught us that thought. Our family may be humble in rank. As nobles, it is our duty to come to the aid of those in need. That is the comfort expected of the nobility." "What a smart and brave girl," the Grand Duke replied. "The comportment of the nobility, you say?" "Chloe Verdier." He bent down and called her name and continued, "Has it never occurred to you that trying to do something beyond your abilities is not only selfish, it creates a nuisance to others? If you had heard the filthy jokes the men told as you hobbled around between them, would you still be able to keep your head held so high and talk about the comportment of noblewomen? What if the Viscount had overheard? Were I him, I would have served the heads of anyone who dared sully my daughters." After speaking, he raised his hand to lift her hair and continued, "Those soldiers have seen dozens of their comrades slaughtered in battle. Do you know what that does to a man? What's more, it isn't fully light. Yet here you are wandering around in a forest with that leg of yours. If something were to happen to you, who would be to blame?" With the last sentence, he moved closer to look at Chloe. She opened her eyes wide in panic and looked at the Grand Duke in front of her. Freed from This's hands, she said, "This land has been part of the Verdier estate since long before I was born. No one may enter these grounds without permission. It is safe." Again, that sarcastic smile. "Safe?" Chloe replied loudly, "Yes, it is completely safe." He tried to take Chloe's stick and said, "Would you still babble such nonsense if I were to do this?" Chloe was startled. At that moment, the Grand Duke raised the stick, and Chloe stopped him. "What are you?" Then suddenly heard a noise. The Grand Duke used the stick to stab a snake to death. Pulling out his stick, he said, "There is always danger lurking in the forest." Chloe was still shocked by the scene that had just happened. "You are reckless to think otherwise," the Grand Duke added. "It's damaged, but you should be able to make it back to the castle." After speaking, he returned the stick to Chloe. "No, thank you," Chloe replied. The Grand Duke smiled triumphantly. "I see you have a bit of temper. That's unexpected. Let me examine your leg." After saying that, he lifted Chloe's skirt to check. "Is it hereditary?" He startled Chloe. She shouted embarrassedly, "Why? Why must you insist on being so rude?" He stood up and replied, "You are much too sensitive. I was simply asking you a question, yet you mistook it for an attack. Allowing your emotions to prevail will only lead to defeat, Lady Chloe." Chloe suddenly spoke up. "I am not a soldier, Your Grace. I do not fight wars." The self-righteous Grand Duke said, "Life itself is war, especially for someone like you." Chloe countered, "That may be, but that is still no reason for you to pry into my life. I only wanted to give you advice. Your refusal to thank me tells me I've struck a nerve." "He's like the devil himself," Chloe thought viciously. "I couldn't have been more wrong about him." Gathering all her courage, Chloe continued, "Your Grace, with all due respect, I have two things I'd like to say to you." The Grand Duke nodded. "Be my guest," Chloe continued. "First, as for this cane that you've damaged, I'd like a replacement." This replied in agreement. "I'll have a word with the woodworker as soon as I return to the barracks." "No," Chloe replied. "I want a cane made from the birch trees that grows on the Thys estate." The Grand Duke frowned and replied, "What?" Chloe continued without answering that question. "I recall you saying yesterday that you will return victorious from the war, and?" This replied with a smile. Chloe continued, "Once you go back to Thys estate after this is all over, I'd like you to make me." At that moment, the Grand Duke reached out and touched Chloe's hair and said, "My lady." His eyes were filled with danger. "What if I were to give you something even better?" Chapter 3 ends here. Chapter 4 begins when the Grand Duke looks closely at Chloe after that statement and continues, "It seems to be your father. Definitely wants something more." Shoving his hand away, Chloe said, "Which brings me to my second point. If my father has ever praised his daughters in front of you, it was purely out of fatherly love and thought. He adores his two daughters. He is not so out of touch with really that he'd forge your house Verdier is far below house Thys in rank. You are not the only one who'd prefer not to become involved with an impaired woman. The same is true of all men, I am sure." The Grand Duke continued, "Chloe, save your self-disparagement for your journals." "No," Chloe denied. As she turned to walk away, she said, There is no disparagement when it comes to the truth. I would like to make one thing clear. Although you are free to pity me, you have no right to assume that I am unhappy or that my life is a war. With such a surprised look on This's face, he did not expect her to say such things. Chloe continued, "Does that mean you are happy living as you are?" Chloe stopped and said the last sentence without turning to look at the Grand Duke. "Your life will never change." "Yes, I am content, living a peaceful, unchanging life in the land where I was born for the rest of my days." With a determined voice, Chloe said, "That to me is happiness." The Grand Duke's eyes seemed to have realized something. Chloe couldn't remember how she got back to the castle. After a conversation with Grand Duke this, all she knew was that the weather was very cold, enveloped her the whole way, like the snake I saw in the forest. Suddenly Jill called out, "Lady Chloe, Duke this and his men have just left." Even though she was sick, Chloe still smiled and replied to Jill, "Thank you for letting me know, Jill." A long time later, Chloe returned to the forest. Returning to reality, Chloe and Alice arrived at the party hall, a magnificent flower castle belonging to Grand Duke this. Alice chirped again, "I cannot believe this castle used for the sole purpose of the Duke's entertainment, and for only one season of the year. It's ridiculously extravagant. Phew. I'm already exhausted." The two girls were so busy talking that they didn't notice a man standing in front of them. He called out, "Lady Alice Verdier." "Oh," Alice replied in surprise. "How wonderful to see you again, Lord Cormier." The boy bowed politely and invited Alice to dance. "Might I be so forward as to ask for the next dance?" Alice happily agreed, not forgetting to introduce, "Oh, this is my sister, Chloe." "It is an honor, Lord Cormier." The two bowed to each other. Lord Cormier said, "No, when it comes to meeting Lady Alice's sister, the honor is all mine." "Perhaps we could dance." Lot before he could finish his sentence, the boy realized the situation and quickly swallowed back what he was about to say with a shy expression. Chloe broke this awkward atmosphere with a social smile. She replied, "The sight of all these beautiful people dancing is a joy in itself. Although I do appreciate the though." Accompanied by the melodious sound of the piano, Chloe looked at her dancing with Lord Cormier with a satisfied expression. She thought, "It seems everyone's forgotten about the scene Alice caused at the last ball. Count Cormier seems like a fine match for her. I have yet to hear anyone mention anything negative about him, and his intentions seem sincere. I'm glad. Does this mean I should offer a word of thanks to the Duke? I'd prefer to avoid him, if possible, but that wouldn't be proper." While sitting in quiet contemplation in the middle of a bustling party, Chloe suddenly asked herself, "Why on earth did he invite us here?" "It is because our father helped him 3 years ago." Has it never occurred to you that trying to do something beyond your abilities is not only selfish, it creates a nuisance to others? Chloe remembered the words the Grand Duke said to her 3 years ago. He didn't seem like someone who appreciates kindness. "I hope he's completely forgotten who I am." So absorbed in her thoughts, Chloe didn't notice the appearance of the person she least expected to meet on the stairs. Only when someone says loudly, "Oh look, it is the Duke," Chloe was startled. What was even scarier was that the person was moving towards her. The Grand Duke has been standing in front of Chloe ever since. Standing up to show respect, Chloe greeted Grand Duke this. Her expression was now filled with worry. Responding to her worry was a calm voice. "It's been a while, Lady Chloe of House Verdier. I am greatly indebted to your father, the Viscount, for his assistance 3 years ago. I would have liked to thank him in person, but I've been much too busy. Thank you for accepting my invitation." The atmosphere right now is strange. Without looking at the Grand Duke, Chloe replied, "It is an honor to be here, Your Grace." Meanwhile, he glanced at Chloe's cane, then raised her hand in her surprise. This said, "If it's not too much, can I invite you to this dance?" Chloe looked at the man in front of her in surprise. End of chapter 4. Chapter 5. After that question from the Grand Duke, the crowd began to talk. What is going through His Grace's mind? Did he not notice her cane? Unlikely she must have done something to antagonize this house. Poor thing. Chloe looked down at the ground while clutching her dress. She thought to herself, this man hasn't changed a bit. She must have felt this was an invitation filled with contempt. Chloe P. My sincerest apologies, Your Grace. I'm afraid I'm not quite proficient enough to be your dance partner. The Grand Duke added, Are you turning me down because too many others have already asked you, and I might have to wait? As he spoke, he walked forward, startling Chloe. If not, I hope you won't refuse me, as I would very much like to dance with you. The Grand Duke concluded the last sentence. Chloe is full of sadness and awkwardness. Just then a man's voice rang out. Are you tormenting an innocent young woman again, Damien? The only prince of the Swanton Kingdom. He continued. Can't you see the poor girl's about to burst into tears? She's already declined your offer. It's not very gentlemanly to keep harassing her. Taking the role of the Grand Duke, the prince continued. Did you forget your manners after spending so much time on the battlefield? The Grand Duke replied calmly, asking a beautiful woman to dance isn't what I consider a breach of etiquette, and I assure you that she isn't the type to cry easily. As he spoke, he looked at Chloe. The prince looked speechless at this and sighed, then said to Chloe, I apologize on my cousin's behalf how uncouth of him. Chloe responded, with all due respect, Your Highness, I believe his grace was only concerning that would end up a wallflower due to my condition. Please rescind your apologies. Oh, the prince immediately had a different view of Chloe. Meanwhile, Chloe Tien introduced herself. I am Chloe Verdier, the eldest daughter of Viscount Verdier. Ah, House Verdier, the prince replied, placing his hand on Chloe's shoulder. I'd like to meet the Viscount. I'm interested by who raised such a beautiful daughter to be so bold. Suddenly, Chloe bowed her head to admit her mistake. To escape that hand, apologies, Your Highness. I'm here today with my younger sister, not my father. Speaking of this, Chloe suddenly remembered something. Now that she remembered, Chloe hadn't seen Alice anywhere. I don't know where she went. Meanwhile, the prince said, Is that so? Then introduce her to me later. I'm rather busy at the moment. Come, Damien, wipe that surly look off your face. Not paying attention to the crown prince, Chloe began to panic, not knowing what she should do. She was afraid that her younger sister would come. Meanwhile, the Grand Duke spoke up. Where is your sister, Lady Chloe? Chloe replied, The ballroom is so large I cannot see her. I shall go look for her at once, if you will allow me. Chloe Verdier, the Grand Duke, called her name and placed his hand on Chloe's cane handle. Do you remember our agreement? Our secret little arrangement? Then he leaned his forehead against Chloe's. Regarding your cane, unless you are going to hand me a new one, please let go of my hand. Don't worry, you'll get it soon. So you've gotten yourself a new one, said while looking at the Grand Duke's cane. This man is insufferable, Chloe exclaimed. Still the same. The Grand Duke still smiled that dangerous smile. It seems you're too desperate to find your sister to scowl at me this time. Chloe looked down unsatisfied. Alice panicked. While that man was still wrapped around her body, Chloe was angry, her voice trembling. What on earth are you? Alice pushed that man away. Go. They'll kill you if they catch you. That man replied, I'd happily die right here. Please, Eddie, Alice begged him. Chloe panicked when she heard the name Eddie. She suddenly remembered that Alice once told her about this name, an encounter with a bohemian at the village festival the other day. He was such an intriguing fellow. He said his name is Eddie. I do hope to see him again. Chloe remembers that day. She was panicked when she realized they had been seeing each other all that time. The Grand Duke placed his hand on Chloe's shoulder to reassure her. Are you all right? Chloe embarrassedly apologized to him. After that man left, Alice hurriedly ran in front of Chloe. Chloe, Eddie happened to appear out of nowhere. I took by surprise. Stop talking. Alice, Chloe interrupted her sister with a voice full of anger. But would you excuse me for a moment while I sent my sister away? Chloe looked up and asked the Grand Duke. As you wish, said the Grand Duke. Chloe then ordered Alice to return to the carriage immediately. After Alice also left, the new Grand Duke spoke. Lord Verdier's second daughter will be setting tongues wagging yet again. Chloe suddenly frowned in fear. He continued to say, she's got quite a talent for causing a scandal every time she appears in high society. Chloe's whole body trembled. I beg you, please do not speak of this to anyone. He asked her again. And why shouldn't I? I am sure you are well aware that no one would find fault with me if I were to punish your family for the crime of bringing an unauthorized person onto my estate. No matter what he said, Chloe trembled. She is really scared. Disaster will fall us if I am unable to convince him to keep quiet. I have to persuade him somehow. Thinking of this, she panicked and quickly knelt down and begged the Grand Duke. All of this is my fault for failing to keep an eye on my foolish sister. I beseech you, punish me instead. I am on my knees begging you. The Grand Duke bent down. And if I refuse, what will you do then? Chloe looked at him confused. Her heart was pounding. Think, Chloe. There's no time to lose. Think of something, for Father and Alice's sake. Suddenly, Chloe spoke up. House, this is a family that values honor above all else. You are its sole heir, a celebrated commander who led your army to great victory during the war, and the first to ever be conferred an Order of Merit by the royal family. The Grand Duke interrupted her. Do continue. Chloe continued, you once said, I shall do everything in my power to lead my soldiers to victory. You will bring glory to those who fought alongside you in the war. It was during that time that the Lord of Remote Castle opened his gates to your soldiers and showed them hospitality. Although he himself did not take up arms, his support must have proven invaluable. Suddenly, the Grand Duke laughed loudly at Chloe's words. In other words, you want me to repay that debt, for that is the way of the honorable house this? Chloe replied, I only ask that you show our humble family a little generosity for our service. The Grand Duke replied, have I not already repaid the favor by inviting you and your sister to a gathering of the most prestigious noble families in the kingdom? It is your sister you should be blamed for trampling all over this opportunity. Now, do you have anything left to say? After speaking, he tried to stand up, but Chloe grabbed his leg and begged, Your Grace. He replied contemptuously, What do you think you are doing? Chloe despaired. Just this once. If you could forgive us just this once, I will do whatever you wish. With a truly trembling voice, Chloe continued, I will never forget your kindness. The Grand Duke sighed. Chloe, why are you doing this? As he spoke, he lifted her chin. The noble woman who had her head held high. Where has she gone? Clinging to my feet and wailing that you'll do anything for me doesn't become you. Hearing this, Chloe's heart beat fast and was filled with panic. Fireworks began to bloom in the sky. The Grand Duke's words mixed with the sound of fireworks. The issue of your sister's marriage must be the reason you are begging me on your knees. Your family's only hope for turning their fortune around is for either you or her to marry into wealth. A marriage of convenience, if you will. Your life, Lady Chloe. Do you not care what comes of it? Chloe replied, No, I don't. To me, happiness is seeing the people I love being well cared for. And are you willing to do anything to achieve that? The Grand Duke spoke closer to Chloe. Chloe replied, If it is within my abilities. Immediately, the Grand Duke grimaced angrily. Interesting. Then I shall have to think about what you might be able to do for me in return. As he spoke, he used his hand to touch her cheek. Now, go back to the Verdier estate at once. Full of sadness, Chloe replied, I would like that. The Grand Duke mentioned the Crown Prince, but His Highness requested to be introduced to Alice from this moment on. If you behave in such a way that attracts the attention of Johannes or any other man in the Empire, I shall kill both of you and your family with my own two hands. He warned Chloe in a dangerous tone. These are the limits of generosity, and one more thing. I suggest you refrain from entering this or with men you do not trust. This garden is a place requited by lovers. Speaking of which, the distance between the two is really close. Chloe blushed slightly and looked at the Grand Duke. He added, who come to satisfy their unbridled passions. Unless you are hoping rumors will spread about a scandal between the two of us, that is. Chloe was the only one left in the flower garden. In front of her was a scene of blazing fireworks, but her heart was full of chaos. Her hands shook to control her panic. What a despicable man, she thought to herself. In the blink of an eye, 3 months later, Chloe wrote a letter to the Grand Duke. To His Grace Duke Damien Ernst von Thys. My Lord Duke, I hope this letter finds you well. There is talk of marriage between my sister Alice and the gentleman she met at the ball that day. Our family is overjoyed, for he is a man of the highest moral character. I am well aware that this is the fruit of your generosity. After much disturbing as to how I might repay your kindness, it has come to the point where, writing here, she thought, that seems a bit excessive. Gilles called her name. I've brought you some refreshments. Thank you. Gilles, Chloe replied. Chloe asked Gilles, how is Alice? Gilles replied, she went out briefly in the morning but hasn't left her room since. She has been disappointed all food, complaining of stomach discomfort. I see. Chloe replied, she didn't go meet with that Bowman again, did she? Gilles replied, I don't believe so. Lady Alice seems to have matured as of late. You're right. Chloe says, she should know better. What with all the talk of engagement to Count Cormier? The Count is a good man, and he is a well-respected member of society. I know Alice will be happy with him. After all, he's a much better match than that itinerant man. Lady Chloe, if Lady Alice gets married, I fear that you'll become rather lonely. Chloe smiled and replied, are you worried for me? Gilles, I know it isn't my place. How could that ever happen? I'll still have you. Thank you for your concern, Gilles. Chloe replied. Chloe's answer made Gilles embarrassed. Chloe suggested, since you're here, why don't you take a look at this letter for me? I'm writing to thank Duke Thys for inviting us to the ball, but I feel that it's still missing something. He's so ill-humored that he'll likely find fault with it no matter what I write. Gilles looked at the letters and thought thoughtfully, if he's so ill-humored, he'll probably be even more disapproving of any delay in receiving these left dash dot in the middle of speaking. Chloe's father opened the door and rushed in. Chloe, my dear. Chloe was surprised. Father? Her father walked in with a happy look on his face. Get ready. Quickly, now. Duke Thys is coming to hunt on our estate. Chloe was surprised. What do you? Her father continued. As you know, our forests are full of wild animals. Chloe thought, why would he come all the way out here to go hunting? Her father added, I only received the message a short while ago. It seems he will be arriving sooner than expected. With his passion for hunting, I suppose it isn't a surprise that he's racing to get here. Chloe and her father went to the lobby to welcome the Duke. Greetings, Your Grace. It is an honor to have you here. I hope the blistering heat hasn't made you too weary. Have you been well? You have far fewer servants than before? Viscount Verdier replied, yes. Well, we're had several years of rather poor harvest. Unfortunately, Chloe interrupted, the castle is still in disarray. We received news of your arrival quite late. Nevertheless, we shall do our utmost to make your stay comfortable. Yes, the Grand Duke replied with a happy expression. I shall hold you to your word. I do. Noble who does not know how to be a gracious host, does not deserve her title. At Viscount Verdier's mansion, the Grand Duke and the Viscount's family sat down for a sumptuous meal. The Viscount opened his mouth. I do hope you'll forgive us, Your Grace. It seems my youngest daughter Alice is feeling indisposed. The Grand Duke smiled and replied, I hope it is nothing serious. Thank you for your concern, the Viscount replied, and we are much obliged for this splendid meal you have prepared for us. My apologies. It is us who should be entertaining you. It is my pleasure, the Grand Duke replied. But what a pity. It seems this course is not to Lady Chloe's liking. Chloe was startled when she heard the Grand Duke mention her name. Without looking at him, she replied lightly that she was a bit tired due to the hot weather, which affected her appetite. The Grand Duke replied, it would do you some good to increase your resilience to the outdoors. Viscount Verdier happily broke this awkward atmosphere. It seems being in your Grace's presence has made my daughter nervous. Her love for the forest is such that it isn't uncommon for her to fall asleep whilst reading beneath the trees. Chloe was startled when her father mentioned the forest in front of the Grand Duke. He looked surprised. So what? So she must be quite familiar with the directions of this forest. Still showing off his daughter, The Viscount still did not pay attention to the implication in that sentence, that she is. It would be no exaggeration to describe the forest leading to the mountains as her very own private garden. I recollect a time in which she feels horribly ill after returning from an outing. Yet, even after suffering so, she never stopped frequenting the woods. The Grand Duke smiled as if looking at Chloe and asked, "You don't say?" The Viscount still innocently added, "Now that I recall, it was exactly around the time you and your soldiers were staying with us in Castle Verdier." Gilles came to pour water for Chloe and saw that her face was not very good, so he asked. The two of them looked quite close. Chloe thanked Gilles for asking, but she was fine, thanks for the glass of water. This scene caught the eyes of the Grand Duke. He looked uncomfortable. With a dangerous look in his eyes, the Grand Duke made a proposal. "If she likes the forest so much, I would like to make an offer that she will show me the way in tomorrow's hunt." Chloe was surprised by the Grand Duke's sudden proposal. Viscount Verdier is worried that Chloe's condition will hinder the hunt. If the Grand Duke wanted someone to show the way, he would find someone else. Don't wait to hear the Viscount's answer. Grand Duke this turned to Chloe to ask her opinion. Chloe sweated and didn't know how to answer. Looking at it, she knew she didn't want to go at all. But anyway, he already knew about it. Chloe replied that if you agree to let my servant lead the horse, then I will be happy to follow you. The Grand Duke refused bluntly. "No, you, my lady, shall be riding with me on my horse. As you can imagine, I am not accustomed to following behind others." In the blink of an eye, tomorrow arrived. Chloe, wearing hunting clothes, stood looking at the Grand Duke sitting on his horse, waving for her to come. Chloe was really worried about whether it was safe or not. She used to leisurely walk around on horseback, but had never gone hunting. Furthermore, how could she trust this man? The Grand Duke urged Chloe. Quickly now, she turned to give her cane to Gilles. The guy asked her with concern, "Will you be all right, my lady?" The Grand Duke was not very pleased when he saw this scene. The two of them sat on the horse, and the Grand Duke asked, "It seems you and that attendant of yours are on rather familiar terms." She asked if he was talking about Gilles. The Grand Duke replied, "Yes, that servant of yours who was in the stables." Chloe explains that Gilles has worked for her family since he was a child. When the other servants left due to lack of pay, he still chose to stay with her family. Chloe continued to speak, unaware that the Grand Duke was frowning behind her. To Chloe's family, Gilles was more than just a worker. Hearing this, the Grand Duke urged his horse to run faster, making Chloe panic and scream, "Your Grace." Direction, Lady Chloe. The Grand Duke responded to her scream. Clearly he was indifferent. The Grand Duke continued asking, "Which way is it? Left or right?" Chloe was so scared that she couldn't even answer in sentences. After urging her, she also shouted, "Left. We must go left." The Grand Duke's hunting dogs quickly ran to pounce on the deer in front. Later, Chloe was so scared that she was sweating. "Looks like they've caught a deer and a rather large one at that," said the Grand Duke. Full of mystery, he leaned close to Chloe's ear and whispered, "So you really do know the lay of the forest?" Chloe was startled by the Grand Duke's sudden action. She thought he did it to torment her. Chloe's hand holding the reins was shaking as if the Grand Duke was the devil incarnate. During this time, this covered her eyes with her hand, signaling calmly, "Breath, Lady Chloe. There, it's all over. Everything will be all right." It seemed the Duke enjoyed the feeling of her relying on him. Night has fallen on Viscount Verdier's castle. The Duke's family was having dinner, and Chloe said she would call the doctor as soon as it was morning. Viscount Verdier didn't understand why he had to call a doctor. Chloe explained that the Duke had been injured while dining. Here, Alice is still quietly enjoying dinner. The Grand Duke was attacked by a wild animal, so his wound needed to be examined. Chloe's father looked worriedly at the Grand Duke and asked if the wound was serious. The Grand Duke replied that he was bitten while walking because hunting on horseback was not thrilling enough. The Viscount offered to let Chloe stitch the Grand Duke's wound as long as the wound was not too deep. Hearing this, Alice slammed her fork into the plate and continued to say to her father, "It's unfortunate, but my house doesn't have anesthetic, so you have to endure the pain." She looked at the Grand Duke and said, Chloe still felt like she should call a doctor for the Grand Duke, but it seemed like Alice wanted the Grand Duke to suffer a bit. She said it was summer, so there were thousands of villagers falling sick from food poisoning every day. But here, and there was only one doctor to take care of all of them. It turns out this is why Chloe studied basic medical care. The Grand Duke wiped his mouth and smiled, and replied, I certainly do not wish to take away a valuable resource from the people of your domain. I am but a guest here. After all, would you mid taking a look after dinner, Lady Chloe? He pretended to smile and asked Chloe for her opinion. But Chloe still thought it would be wiser to send in an expert. Her father continued, she is right. Allow me to send for him right aw. Before he could finish speaking, the Grand Duke interrupted. Back when my soldiers were staying at your castle several years ago, the sigh of Lady Chloe tending to their injuries left impression on me. I have faith your daughter will do an excellent job. Full of pride in his daughter, Viscount Verdier happily asked the Grand Duke if he still remembered that story. The Grand Duke replied, of course, I haven't forgotten a since detail about the events that transpired on these grounds. As he spoke, he glanced at Chloe. Chloe looked at the Grand Duke in confusion, not expecting him to still remember those things. After dinner, Chloe went to the Grand Duke's room to bandage him. You look like a prisoner being led to the gallows, the Grand Duke teased. He thinks that with a simple request, she doesn't need to be so scared. As he spoke, he didn't look at her but was still intently reading the book. Chloe didn't pay attention to those words. Please show me your wound, she said. Why do you look for yourself? He responded to her indifferently. Chloe sat down on the chair with the medicine tray and told him to roll up his sleeve so she could check. The Grand Duke said, I am sure you are capable of that much, Chloe. He wanted her to lift his sleeve herself, but Chloe thinks that's not something an unmarried woman should do. The Grand Duke laughed at Chloe's answer and said, how old-fashioned of you. Well, I suppose you are right, not making it difficult for her anymore. He took off his shirt. When there was no need to do so, Chloe panicked. Seeing her staring at him, he teased, I know it might be hard to resist, but I think it'd be better if you didn't stare so. Chloe's face was as red as a tomato. She never told him to take off his shirt. Why was he so rude? After a while, to regain her composure, she also began to give first aid to the Grand Duke's arm. While cleaning the wound, Chloe reminded the Grand Duke that his teeth might hurt a bit. The Grand Duke teased her again, saying, I want you to make me suffer as much as possible. Seeing that she did not answer, he immediately asked, you said your private tutor was a physician? Yes, Chloe replied. The Grand Duke replied, that must be useful in situations like this. Chloe gently stitched the Grand Duke's wound. Meanwhile, Chloe also mentioned that she had learned a bit of medicine from him, but it was a completely different pursuit from the one being used now. The Duke asked, and what might that be? Chloe replied carefree, embroidery. The Grand Duke laughed. This is the first time in my life I've considered embroidery as a useful pastime. He added, all right, do tell, does your sister still hold secret rendezvous after dark? Chloe did not answer that question. She just replied, please refrain from speaking. You should be as still as possible. Answer my question, the Grand Duke reminded her. Chloe had to answer him. Since that night, she has seen the error of her ways, and thanks to your grace, there is talk of marriage between her and Count Cormier. Chloe was very grateful for that. The Duke replied to Chloe with a sarcastic voice, had I known my silence would be repaid with 3 months of silence from you, I would never have done you that favor. After speaking, he moved his face close to Chloe, making her heart pound. You are much too close, your grace. Chloe said, answer me, the Duke emphasized. You can tell he's really upset because Chloe hasn't responded once in the past 3 months. Chloe's sweat dropped, explaining she had also written a lot of letters. The Grand Duke said he had never received one. Chloe added it was because she couldn't send them herself. The closer he got, the more the Grand Duke realized that Chloe was lying. Chloe used both hands to push him away while her heart felt like it was about to jump out of her chest. She begged the Duke not to come any closer, but the Grand Duke didn't pay any attention to that. He repeated once more, asking Chloe to speak truth. Gathering all her courage, Chloe pushed the Grand Duke away and shouted, it's because you ignore me. Duke this was really surprised by Chloe's answer. Blushing, not daring to look directly at the Duke, Chloe added, I am well aware how unbearably repulsive you find me. That is why I hesitated so. I was unsure of how I should try to repay you. My apologies. Chloe hesitantly apologized and then tried to stand up to leave this awkward situation. When she stood up, Chloe tripped over the Grand Duke's shirt, so she slipped and was about to fall when Duke this quickly caught her and threw her onto the bed. Chloe opened her eyes wide in panic and looked at the Grand Duke. She noticed that the wound she had just stitched had torn open. The Grand Duke said, "Chloe can get stitches again or not?" Chloe is worried. She asked him, "What on earth is it that you want from me?" In response to that question, the Grand Duke stroked her hair and replied, "I think you already know the answer to that." Then he kissed her hair. Chloe replied, "I am only here to treat you per my father's instructions." After speaking, she turned away without looking into the Duke's eyes. "Oh, Lady Chloe." The Grand Duke looked at her with an innocent look. "Do you truly believe that is all he wanted?" Chloe suddenly realized that this conversation was exactly like 3 years ago. He said the same thing. Chloe replied, "I understand why you doubt people's intentions, for you have learned not to trust others while on the battlefield. However, to think every woman in the kingdom is desperate to marry you is a bit of an egotistical delusion, is it not?" Duke this was once again surprised by Chloe's answer, and then he burst out laughing. Chloe didn't understand why he was laughing. Meanwhile, the Duke kept laughing. Chloe thinks he's probably really out of his mind. Duke this finally stopped laughing and replied, "Fine, shall we put your theory to the test?" Lifting her up, the Duke told Chloe she could go because her work was done. Leaving the Duke's room, Chloe felt so relieved. Chloe went back to her room. In front of her dressing table was a pair of gloves. She thought, why would she waste time thinking about how to thank such a terrible man? Chloe thought she was foolish to think of giving the Grand Duke these gloves. Thinking back to what the Grand Duke had just done made her angry because he didn't use a bigger needle. Trying to suppress her dislike for that man, Chloe was still grateful that, thanks to him, Alice was able to meet Count Cormier. Opening the window to cool down and standing by the window, Chloe was still worried about Alice. She thought that once Alice got married and things gradually became stable, everything would be okay. One morning, a shocking incident caused chaos in the Viscount's castle. Alice panicked and asked Chloe if the Grand Duke was injured in the head instead of injuring his hand, right? Viscount Verdier asked the Duke if what he had just heard was true. Duke this still firmly replied that he wanted to propose to the Viscount's daughter, Lady Alice Verdier. The Viscount smiled wryly and said that as the Duke saw, Alice was betrothed to Count Cormier. The Grand Duke calmly sipped his tea and said that fact did not change his desire to marry Alice. Moreover, he added another sentence. "It seems you do not find me adequate, Lord Verdier, as you keep making unnecessary remarks." The atmosphere suddenly became very strange. The Viscount quickly explained that he didn't mean that, but no matter what he did, he had to respect his daughter's wishes. The Grand Duke also agreed with that thought. He offered to give the Viscount 3 days to consider the proposal. During that time, the Grand Duke will stay at his mansion next to the castle. Before leaving, the Grand Duke also emphasized that he hoped the Viscount would consider this matter carefully. After hearing the Duke's proposal, Alice angrily went into the room and shouted that she never wanted to become a duchess, breaking everything and then lying down crying. Even though she clearly knew this was her family's opportunity, she didn't want that. Chloe gently comforted her sister. Chloe also didn't understand why the Duke proposed to Alice, unless she remembered the conversation the night before with the Duke. Patting Alice, Chloe consoled her that she didn't have to go through this if she didn't want to. Chloe said she would talk to her father about this again. Alice looked at her sister with tears in her eyes, then hugged Chloe. Alice worries that what if something goes wrong and she can't get married? What will happen to her family now that the Duke has proposed? This will definitely mark the end of things for Count Cormier. Speaking of this, Alice was really scared. She was afraid that if she refused the Duke, he would do bad things to her family. Chloe comforted her sister. "Don't cry, my sister. Everything will be fine. You will receive new proposals as time passes. Don't worry. Just bear with it a little longer." Suddenly, Alice confessed to her sister, I am in love with Eddie." Chloe looked at her sister worriedly. Alice continued, "I am carrying his child." Chloe was shocked when she heard this. Alice sobbed and asked her sister what to do. Series Betrayal of Dignity. "I'm pregnant with his child" words. Alice's confession still echoed inside Chloe's head until she goes back to her room. "Chloe, what should I do?" The image of her sister in despair made her unable to stop worrying. Chloe thought warily, is this happening because we have placed too much of a burden on her? If this is the price we have to pay for our own selfishness, then we must prevent this marriage at all costs. Price. Chloe clutched the corner of her dress, secretly determined. I must first convince my father. Early the next morning at Verdier Castle, Chloe woke up and went to her father's room to discuss something. What brings you here so early in the morning? Viscount Verdier looked at his daughter curiously. I want to tell you about Alice's marriage. Chloe hesitated a bit. I've been thinking a bit, and the Viscount frankly said, I've been pondering this all night. The possibility of Alice marrying into the Grand Ducal family is both a concern and a great relief. Chloe wondered what her father meant. This is a family that values honor, which means they would never chase Alice away. Instead, they would find fault with her personality or behavior. The Viscount explained. Chloe became shaken when she heard her father's words. Duke, this certainly knows his fate. It's cruel when a person gets divorced in this empire. Chloe looked seriously at the Viscount. Father, there is something I must tell you. Viscount put down his cup of tea and asked, what's going on? Suddenly, servant Gilles opened the door and shouted loudly, Lord Verdier, Lady Chloe, Lady Alice, she has disappeared. Chloe and her father were shocked to hear this shocking news. The Viscount asked eagerly, what do you mean, Gilles? How could she disappear? The servant gave the Viscount a stack of letters and said, I found this in her room. The Viscount quickly grabbed it and exclaimed, show it to me. To my beloved father and dear sister, I grew up witnessing the boundless love father had for mother. I learned from you that true love transcends both illness and death. Because you are living proof of the power of love, I no longer wish to ignore what my heart desires. I also wish to keep my head held high for the sake of the child I carry, and prove to myself that no love should be forbidden. I shall now relinquish the name of Verdier, and simply live as Alice. I apologize, father. Do not forgive me for this selfish deed. Chloe, I am sorry. I hope I will be able to make amends for this one day. When the Viscount read the end of the letter, his whole body shook. Chloe shouted, Father. He fainted on the floor because he was so shocked. Even though I'm a thankless daughter, but please know that I am sincere when I say that I love you with a heavy heart and 1,000 apologies, Alice. Alice's departure more or less made the already gloomy mansion seem more deserted. Chloe had been by her sick father's side all day, when the Viscount finally woke up and whispered, Chloe, my dear, did you know about that? Chloe could only keep silent before her father's question. He continued slowly, I vaguely realized that Alice was interested in a certain man. The fact that you did not mention it to me means that you did not agree with this. And if even you saw if he's obnoxious, he's definitely a scoundrel. Chloe replied, if Alice leaves despite my objections, then I'm sure he must be a worthy man. I trust her. Chloe held her father's hand and comforted him. I believe everything will be fine. Please focus on your recovery. She tried to force a smile on her lips. As for Duke, leave it to me. I shall speak with him. Chloe left the Viscount's room with the Marquis. She raised her voice to question. You looked the other way when she left, did you not? Gilles could only stand still and listen to the owner's explanation. I knew from the moment you walked in holding her letter. You would never have entered her room without her permission. The servant also did not hide anything. I suppose there's no use hiding anything from you. Chloe looked straight into his eyes and said softly, thank you for being there for her. I wasn't sure the right thing to do myself. That is why I am grateful to you for helping her leave. What done is done. We must make the best of it now. After hearing this, Gilles felt uneasy and reached out his hand to stop her, mumbling and calling, Lady Chloe. But he gathered his courage and held Gilles' trembling hand tightly, looking down in regret. I hope you won't blame yourself. Please don't think you must take responsible for this, because if you do, Chloe immediately interrupted. I don't know how I can live with myself. She said the last word. Gilles, I am the only one who can take care of the house Verdier now. I will find a way for all of us to survive, even if it is a dangerous choice. Three days later, at the estate next to the Verdier Duchy, the Duke's voice was filled with complacency. How unexpected. Did you find my offer of marriage so pleasing that you decided to personally inform me of its acceptance? Chloe replied that it was not something I could discuss in a letter. The Duke changed the subject. Are you affected with an infectious disease? Chloe hesitated. I'm not sure what you mean. If that isn't the case, why don't you step closer? Damien smiled slightly. Come, take a seat next to me. His appearance today is a bit more liberal than usual. That made Chloe feel uncomfortable and saw her hesitate. The Duke raised his voice. Or will you disobey my orders? Chloe showed a dissatisfied face and sat down on the sofa. He continued to talk. My wound is not getting any better. Chloe asked, have you seen a physician? The Duke replied, no. He looked at the medical box filled with bottles of solution and said, will you apply some of this solution for me? Chloe looked unenthusiastic. This expression, he excitedly read out, do you not have hands, your grace? I can tell what you are thinking with look on your face. She frowned in discomfort. Well, you are mistaken. On the sofa, Chloe gently applied medicine to the Duke's wound and advised, these days are too hot to promote proper healing. It would be best to remain indoors as much as possible. Spending time outside will only impede the process. Damien replied, we don't have such pleasant summers back home on the This estate. I enjoy the feeling of being scorched from head to toe. Chloe suddenly blushed with embarrassment. You may withdraw your arm now. Why was my proposal rejected? Chloe clutched the corner of her dress, gathering the courage to reveal the truth. Marriage is now physically infeasible for my sister. And the reason? Did she suddenly pass away? Duke this asked. May I ask you a question? Double quotes. As Damien put his shirt back on, he replied, go ahead. Chloe asked bluntly, the reason you want to marry my sister, is it because of me? The sound of the waves mixed with the Duke's mocking tone. I'm curious. Why do you think that, Chloe? I am asking if your intention in interfering with my family is to being about my complete and utter ruin, Chloe replied. The Duke burst into laughter. Do you remember what you said to me the other day? If you think every woman in this kingdom desperate to marry you, then that is a delusion of self-satisfaction, she said, with a sneer. I would say it is you, Lady Chloe, who is self-absorbed to the point of delusion. The Duke continued to mock. Do you really think I would marry the daughter of an undistinguished Latin viscount just to torment you, her disabled sister? Chloe responded angrily. You're right, I think it unlikely. Damien replied sarcastically. You can be surprisingly amusing sometimes. Did you know that? Chloe replied. No, I did not. Does that mean you love Alice then? Damien sighed. Do I strike you as a romantic who believes marriage should be based on love? Chloe responded, then there can only be one other explanation as to why you proposed to my sister. And what could that be? Damien asked. Chloe offered her hypothesis. There must be some pressing reason why you must marry the daughter of House Verdier, one that you cannot reveal to others. The Duke hesitated. Go on. Chloe boldly continued. If there is some reason behind why you must turn down the most eligible brides in the kingdom for the offspring of a low-ranking family, it likely does not matter who you marry, which means you might even prefer to wed a woman with a flaw so conspicuous that no one would give her a second glance. Damien smiled faintly. You mean, for instance, a woman who has lost the use of one leg? Chloe, determined, replied, if I would have a more perfect bride for you, would I not? At that moment, Damien moved closer, his lips nearing hers. Before Chloe could react, the Duke captured her sweet lips in a kiss. Chloe gasped, her entire body becoming paralyzed and limp. She tried to push the Duke away to escape the kiss. But how could a girl's strength resist a man who had once been to the battlefield? After a while, Damien finally released Chloe. Her breathing became rapid. She struggled to break free from the Duke's possession. What do you think you're doing? Chloe asked angrily. Damien slyly replied, you always say such cutting remarks that I wanted to see just how sharp your tongue could truly be. This seems like the perfect opportunity to ask if you are able to bear me an air. He bent down to kiss her bare shoulders and inhaled the sweet scent from her body. Slap. One side of Damien's face bore a stinging red mark. In her fury, Chloe had slapped the arrogant Duke straight in the face. She raised her voice, scolding. To act this way when you have yet to respond to my offer is shockingly disrespectful, Your Grace. Damien licked the corner of his mouth. He straightened himself and smirked. Indeed, that is a fitting response. However, I suggest you familiarize yourself with the principles of negotiation again. Now go. Looking at the man in front of her, Chloe couldn't help but feel worried and uneasy. Several days had passed since the meeting with the Duke at the neighboring estate, yet Chloe couldn't forget what had happened. She sat absent-mindedly on the chair, unable to focus on anything. Recalling the scene, Chloe unconsciously placed her hand on her lips. Those lips had been possessed by that man. He had kissed her deeply. He had looked at her with a face full of desire and possession. Her lips curved into a faint smile, and a soft voice escaped. Chloe? Lady Chloe. She jolted back to reality, realizing that Jules had been very worried, seeing her mistress looking so lost. Are you all right? You are looking quite pale. Chloe exhaled a breath, regaining her composure. I'm fine. Now, where were we? Jules continued reading the letter. Following the congratulatory message regarding the engagement, the royal family has continued to send gifts to Lady Alice. The garden is still full of wagons packed with presents. The servant hesitated slightly, then asked, "If I may ask, my lady, did your conversation with the Duke not go well?" Chloe thought to herself, was my intuition correct? Prince Johannes is the official heir to the royal throne, but there is one person whose power is comparable to that of the royal family and who enjoys the respect of the people. No one else but the Duke. The royal family must be delighted by the news that the Duke, whose power has grown immensely, is marrying the daughter of a humble viscount instead of a noblewoman from a distinguished family. The Duke himself was aware of this fact. There was a knock on the door, and another servant entered the room. He respectfully leaned toward Chloe and informed her, "A guest has arrived, my lady." "A guest? Who is it?" Chloe asked. "It's Duke this," the servant replied. She started when she heard that name mentioned. "Shall I let the master know?" the servant asked. Chloe grabbed her cane and began to stand up. "No, my father is ill. We shouldn't disturb him. I shall meet the Duke on his behalf. Please ask him to wait in for me in the drawing room. I'll go get ready and then meet him there." In Chloe's private room, the Duke's voice suddenly sounded. "There you are." Both were taken aback to see Damien sitting on the sofa. "I've been waiting for you," the Duke said with a warm smile. "You look surprised to see me here." Chloe, annoyed, responded, "It is highly improper to enter a lady's empty bedchamber uninvited, your grace." Damien stepped toward her. "I couldn't help myself. I missed you too much. This is a private place. I will have you shown the drawing room," Chloe replied. He reached out and touched a strand of her chestnut hair. "Will that really be necessary? Our relationship will soon be such that we will not be needing privacy from one another." Gilles stood nearby, feeling dizzy and disgusted by the Duke's actions. Clearly, his expressions were noticed by Damien. The Duke frowned angrily at the contemptuous servant who was disrupting his good moment. Damien shot him a sharp look and ordered, "Shut the door." Gilles retreated like a discarded puppy, gripping the door handle tightly, his whole body trembling with helplessness. Back in Chloe's private room, Damien handed her a gift. "These jewels have been passed down through the generations of House This. If we were to follow traditions, my mother would be the one giving these to you. But she does not quite approve of this match." Chloe responded coldly, "That's to be expected." "I understand." Seeing her resigned demeanor, Damien felt at a loss for words and accused, "Are you only pretending to remain calm, or do you genuinely feel indifferent?" Chloe glanced at him and honestly replied, "I'm afraid to reacting too hastily, for I don't know what words will come out of your mouth next." He smiled slightly. "Does this mean you accept my offer, your grace?" Chloe gently replied, "Yes." Damien held a finely crafted necklace and spoke gently. "Consider this a proposal, Chloe Verdier. Will you be my wife?" Chloe looked at the man in front of her and bowed sincerely. "I am truly grateful that you decide to accept my offer." Damien was puzzled. "Grateful? Yes, your grace," Chloe replied. He gently put the necklace back in its place. "And how will you prove that?" Chloe replied, "I will do my very best to be of assistance in endeavor you undertake regardless of what it may be." "And what do you think I want?" Chloe hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "Chloe, must I run my tongue across your parched lips again to make you open your mouth?" Blushing, Chloe responded, "I believe it is power that you want, although I am much too short-sighted to know precisely what you are thinking." Damien, slightly annoyed, clicked his tongue and warned, "From this moment, you are torridden from saying such things in my presence." "I know you are not short-sighted." Chloe's face reddened as she hesitantly replied, "I shall do everything in my capacity to assist you and if you should wish to divorce in the future, I shall gladly accept to your request." Damien raised his voice. "You would grant me a divorce?" He smirked and looked at her with amusement. "How insolent. Chloe, your arrogance infuriates me." Chloe clutched the edge of her dress tightly. "I apologize if that is how it sounded, but I hope you will not misconstruct my intentions." Damien, losing patience, gave her a cold look and asked in a deep, direct voice, "And what exactly is your intention?" "What is? If you hope I'll get from me." Chloe gripped her dress even tighter and, gathering her resolve, directly answered, "I want to be a duchess." Damien stepped toward her, taking the jeweled necklace and silently placing it around Chloe's neck. The Duke's expression was very satisfied. "Saying you want to become the Duchess is exactly what I wanted to hear. It means you are willingly offering yourself to me. How does it feel to wear the jewels of house this around your neck?" Feeling shy, Chloe quickly turned away. "They feel heavy, Your Grace," Duke this said. "This is nothing compared to the weight of responsibility you will carry as the wife of a duke. Do you still wish to be my wife?" Chloe was silent for a moment, but quickly made up her mind and accepted. "I wish for nothing more in the world." Damien gently lifted her face. "I see. And have you given more thought to the principles of this negotiation?" He slyly asked. "What do you think it is I want in this very moment?" Chloe, surprised, grabbed the Duke's collar, her face turning red as she gave him a deep kiss. Damien responded to her boldness by entwining their mouths. Chloe's breathing became rapid, and her cheeks flushed with each advance of his lips. After a while, her hands gradually loosened their grip on his collar. Still shy after the passionate kiss, Chloe felt overwhelmed. The Duke smiled slightly and observed her expression. "Is this too much for you?" The Duke chuckled softly, observing the girl's expression as she replied, "I do not wish to lie." Damien's reminder that she would have to get used to it only made her more resolute. "Things will only get more intense," he continued. After the Duke's proposal to Chloe, they quickly informed Lord Tuke of the news. "Oh, my dear Chloe, I had absolutely no idea," Damien assured, holding her hand warmly. "I expect she will make a fine duchess," Viscount beamed. "Of course, she will guarantee it. My daughter is a wise young lady. I am sure she will win everyone's respect. If you can just make her happy, I shall willingly offer everything I have, including my own life," Viscount said. At that moment, the Duke placed his hand over Chloe's hand. Suddenly, Chloe realized the gloves she had intended to give to the Duke earlier. Somehow, he had found them. Those were the gloves she had embroidered but hadn't been able to give to him yet. If that's the case, Damien's confident voice brought her back to reality. "Will you grant me the forest on the Verdier estate and the moutaine that leads to it?" Viscount surprised. "The forest and moutaine. But the soil is barren, and those trees can't be used for anything," Damien replied. "They are lands cherished by Lady Chloe. They also happen to be where everything began between the two of us," he added, as Chloe officially joined the chessboard of life. "Do you swear to remain by your spouse's side for life and fulfill your duties through all the trials and tribulations you may face?" Damien looked at the radiant bride before him. "I do," she replied firmly. Now the bride and groom could kiss each other as a solemn vow before God. Chloe blushed shyly upon hearing the Archbishop's words, and suddenly Damien leaned in close and kissed her cheek. Curious, the Archbishop asked if she expected something else. Chloe glanced nervously elsewhere, avoiding eye contact. Duke Viscount applauded, praising her splendid appearance, while Gilles, her beloved, looked on in awe at her transcendent beauty in the pure white gown. The Archbishop's voice rang out amidst the presence of our Lord, declaring them husband and wife. Damien glanced at his bride and called her name as Chloe accidentally dropped the bouquet of roses in her hand, amidst the startled exclamations. Damien lifted her up amidst the well wishes of the guests. Chloe, blushing and tiny, begged, "Our sincerest congratulations, Your Grace. Please put me down once again." He kissed her cheek. "Do you intend to drag this out?" The Duke's words only made Chloe blush even more. She wrapped her arms around his neck as he smiled contentedly. "Well done, Chloe von Thys." 3 months later, at Verdier territory, everyone in the village was abuzz about the marriage between the Lord of the House of Thys and the eldest daughter of the Viscount. For immediately after the ceremony, the Duke had left without spending even one night with his new bride. People speculated that the Duchess had been abandoned at her parents' home. Additionally, a tabloid had spread rumors that even after getting married, the Duke could not abandon his philandering ways. The mistress mentioned in the rumors was the Marchioness Isabella. At the dress shop, Chloe read all the news from that tabloid. The shop owner, standing next to her, appeared worried. "I shall burn it at once, my lady," she said. Chloe replied calmly, "That won't be necessary. Burning these newspapers won't make those rumors disappear into ashes. If you have finished taking my measurements, I shall take my leave." The woman looked confused. "But we have yet discussed the fabric and design." Chloe responded slowly, I will leave that to your description. You are more knowledgeable in these matters than I. The shop owner respectfully bowed as Chloe left. She glanced at the gossip column and sighed. Men and their inability to manage themselves will be the ruin of this country. The sound of horse hooves echoed. Inside the carriage, the servant Gilles asked, "Why don't you delegate the management of the estate to someone else during this period? I can take care of your affairs as well." Chloe replied that there was no need to pay attention to the malicious things those tabloids mentioned. "Gilles, if people were to see me, the Duchess, allowing myself to be swayed by such baseless rumors, they will only grow more uneasy," she said. Gilles could only remain silent, watching his mistress endure with a calm expression, as there was something more pressing on her mind than the outside gossip. Before the Duke left, he had instructed her on her duties. "I shall return to the capital now that the ceremony is over," Damien said, staring intently. "As for you, you may perform your ducal duties from here." Chloe thought to herself that for the past 3 months, he hadn't responded to any of the letters she sent. Recalling the image of her husband entwined with that red-haired woman in the newspaper, she wondered if that was the reason. "To be honest, I don't expect anything from this marriage," she thought, clenching the corner of her dress. "There is no reason for this to affect me." Gilles, understanding her thoughts, spoke up. "Lady Chloe, there is good news waiting for you at the mansion." "Good news?" she asked. "Yes, a letter from Lady Alice. It's quite short, but it seems she is still well." Chloe's mood instantly changed as she cheerfully asked, "Why did you not tell so sooner, Gilles?" "A letter from Alice is wonderful." The butler was also happy for her, knowing that Alice was safe and that her father's health had improved. This marriage had also lifted the spirits of the people in the territory. What could be better? In any case, I hope to live far away from him, Chloe thought. If I could live peacefully like this forever, she mused. As evening fell upon the mansion, evening at the manor, a handwritten letter had been delivered. "As I have mentioned in my previous correspondences, all is well on the Verdier estate thanks to your grace. I hope the business that has called you away will soon be settled. I shall write again should anything noteworthy arise. Sincerely, Chloe Verdier." The Duke smiled. "Chloe Verdier?" he thought. "Does she not intend to take my name?" Next to a tabloid from the other day still on his desk, the headline screamed, "Was even marriage unable to extinguish Duke? This is fiery passion." The Duke, newly married, had been caught dating Marchioness Isabella. Damien picked up the newspaper and muttered, "She must have read this, but she didn't mention it in her letter. How does she feel about it?" "Chloe, did you shed tears in solitude?" "No. You probably held them back as usual. That's what frustrates me the most." He sneered as he turned to another page. It read, "The Duke's secret affair during his honeymoon." This had bolstered the position of Prince Johann, heir to the throne. Meanwhile, rumors about the king's deteriorating health continued to spread. Damien thought to himself, "They have reported exactly as I told them to." Suddenly, he pondered something, his fingers continuously tapping on the table, recalling the conversation in the private room that day. Chloe had said she would help him as much as she could in everything. He was a bit annoyed. "She talks as if she could do anything. Whenever I think about her, a surge of desire to grasp something tight suddenly arises within me. She irritated me from the very first time I saw her. It was so annoying to see her mingling among the wounded soldiers and treating them, while she could easily be mistaken for one of them. The strange feeling that kept rising within me every time I saw her like that left a sour taste in my mouth." Damien opened the desk drawer. He fondled the white glove she had painstakingly made for him. "Perhaps next time, I should lock her in a room and make her sew all day. And when she runs out of clothes to sew," Damien smirked, "I will have her embroider my body at the royal palace." A raspy cough and the weak voice of the king interrupted him. "It won't be long before the Lord takes me. I trust you will serve Johann well even after I'm gone." The old man struggled to breathe. "I am sure you know his mind is not sound. Swear before the Lord that you will be loyal to Johann." Damien shot him a cold look. "I will, if he is a king worthy of my loyalty," the old king shouted. What did you say?" Coughing, he continued to yell in pain, "It is the duty of a subject to serve his king, Damien." Damien, sitting beside the king, replied calmly, "Then it is only to clear what the future holds for this country. It is ruled by someone who has gone mad without anyone noticing. Ah, I take back that last part. I know of his madness, as do you, and all those who died at his hands. There are a flood of rumors talking about bodies being pulled from his room one after the other. It will not be long before the people find out that such words were never rumors at all. Your Majesty, I risk my life on the battlefield for the sake of this kingdom. I will always be ready to fight for my country. Is it not right for the throne to belong to someone worthy of it? The old king screamed. What do you dare imply before me? Coughing violently, he continued. Since when? Since when have you harbored such selfish ambitions? Damien coldly replied. Since when? Since the day I was born. Back at the Verdier estate, Chloe was sitting in the study, reading a book. However, her mind was not on the words but elsewhere. Duke this and Marquis Isabella. Maybe I should have taken a closer look at that article. She closed the book in frustration, telling herself to forget about it. Chloe, how important is it really to you? Suddenly, the Viscount entered the room with a letter. Chloe hesitated as she took the letter. The Duke hadn't written to her since he left for the capital. She gently opened the envelope and read the words on the paper. To my beloved wife, Chloe von Thys. Please wait for me at the Thys estate while performing your duties as Duchess there. I hope you have been looking forward to our meeting as impatiently as I have. Your husband in the Verdier Mansion's hall. The Viscount was instructing Jules on escorting Lady Chloe safely to the Thys castle. As with any parent, no matter how grown their children are, they are always seen as little ones in need of care. The Viscount held Chloe's hand with affection. My dear, you and Alice will always be my little girls. Chloe joked. If I had to guess, you will still be saying that even when I am an old woman. The Viscount replied, you are probably right. I know you are the honorable wife of a duke now and that you should have left my side long ago. But Chloe immediately embraced the Viscount. Father, I will be all right, she whispered. I wish I could stay with you forever. You have seen for yourself how much the Duke cherished me. Though Chloe had no desire to go to this estate, she knew she had important duties there. It will be all right, truly, Chloe reassured herself, forcing a smile. So please, send me off with a smile. Toot toot. The train slowly departed for the estate. In the first-class compartment, the servant Jules appeared hesitant. Lady Chloe, I could have traveled in a cargo car. This compartment is too luxurious for me. Chloe replied gently, we have a long today journey ahead. Besides, I will soon spend most of my time alone. Outside the train, fields of wheat were covered by thousands of falling white snowflakes. In the distance were white-capped mountains. It's snowing, Chloe sighed as she watched the snowflakes dance outside the window. After the long journey, the two finally arrived at the family castle. An elderly woman respectfully greeted them. Welcome, my lady. I am Elisa, the head maid and housekeeper of this family. Chloe looked around and thought, this castle is enormous. Yet only one person has come out to greet me. That can only mean I am not welcome here. Chloe tapped her cane once as she responded. Thank you for the warm welcome. Would you prepare some food for my attendant to take on his return journey? He is weary from escorting me here. Elisa hesitated. Very well. Gilles was about to stop his mistress. Lady Chloe, Elisa seems unapproachable. I shall call a maidservant. Find something for your servant. You may follow me. Chloe turned to Gilles. I apologize for not being able to see you off. Thank you and travel safely. She limped along behind Elisa, leaving him behind. In a room, Elisa respectfully announced, Your Grace, Lady Chloe has arrived. A voice of an older woman spoke up. Show her in. Chloe politely greeted. My name is Chloe. It is an honor to finally meet you. Thank you for arranging for the carriage to collect us from the station. It is truly appreciated. The woman's commanding voice responded. Look at me, Chloe. She looked up at the woman, surprised. The woman before her had blonde hair and blue eyes like delphiniums, exuding an air of nobility. You look quite pretty. You look just like the very first deer Damien caught as a boy. Chloe smiled in return. You are too kind. The woman continued, Are you secretly aiming to seize that vast fortune? Or have you learned about the royal family's misdeeds? Chloe gently replied, I don't know much about that, ma'am. The woman touched Chloe's cheek, causing her to feel a bit embarrassed. Then that must mean Damien chose you as his bride for reasons other than practical ones. It is true that you are beautiful, but hunting a deer with an injured leg for sport is rather unusual for my son. She waved her hand. I can't believe he asked for family jewelry to propose out of curiosity, perhaps? He loves the thrill. Chloe responded. I'm sure he wouldn't decide to marry based on momentary interest. I don't know why he chose me, but I will serve him to the best of my ability, despite my shortcomings, to ensure the prosperity of the family. The woman commented, "Oh, you're smarter than I thought. I like you. With your beautiful face, my jewelry will suit you well. And since you're quite clever, you can help manage this castle. You see, I have high expectations for my son. Nothing in this world is more important than his family. Now that you're here," she became excited. "Let me tell you about Damien's childhood." Chloe smiled awkwardly, feeling something was off. The conversation dragged on until late at night. She collapsed on her bed, lamenting. She spent hours bragging about her son. It seemed Damien had been strictly raised. "My son is number one." Chloe recalled being overwhelmed by the woman showing her pictures of Damien as a boy. She thought, but he was adorable as a child. She turned over exhausted and noticed something on the bedside table. It was a portrait of the Duke, looking dashing. One morning at the Thies estate, the Duke's mother was sipping tea, commenting, "I was rather surprised to see you shut yourself in the study for 3 days, even though you just arrived here. It seems you're like Damien in this regard. Once he focuses on something, he loses track of time." She set her teacup down. "So, what do you want to discuss?" Chloe softly asked Elisa. "Could you give us some privacy?" The Duchess mother interrupted. "Oh, Chloe, Elisa has served our family since Damien was born. She's practically part of the family, so there's no need for her to leave." Chloe ignored those words, more concerned about the letter from Damien. It read, "To my dear Duchess of House Vonthus, how are you finding life at Britch Castle? I trust you are performing your duties as a duchess within a satisfactory manner. I hope you will not disappoint me. Missing you very much, Damien." Chloe sighed, feeling the letter was more of a warning than a love note. Reflecting on her duties as a duchess, she looked at the two women across from her and said, "After reviewing the ledger for the past 3 days, I discovered discrepancies in the castle's finances. It's clear money is being siphoned off through some loophole." The Duke's mother couldn't help but be surprised. "My dear, controlling such a large estate is no easy feat." Elisa, who was standing behind, seemed nervous. She became restless and secretly glanced at her mistress as Chloe continued, "Yes, and that's another reason we need to manage this place as tightly as possible. The records do not clearly state the reason for the expenditures, and the total taxes everyone has to pay are not recorded either. Additionally, there is a discrepancy between the actual quantity of wine in the cellar and the amount recorded. This is not something that has happened just once or twice, but as repeated many times." Chloe stared intently at the head maid standing on the other side. "It seems that this irregularity began around the time Mrs. Elisa replaced Stuart in the position." The head maid gaped in horror at Chloe's revelations. The entire room fell silent except for her sobbing. Tears fell to the floor, causing the Duchess's mother to sigh. "Elisa, please leave us alone for a moment." Ashamed, she covered her face and hurried away. "Yes, madam." Once the door closed, the mother-in-law scolded, "Don't you think it would have been better to discuss this privately?" Chloe replied, "I apologize, madam, but I still believe it is necessary to dismiss Elisa, as well as the stable manager Robinson." The mother was puzzled. "Robinson? What's this about?" Chloe answered, "Elisa must have used a carriage to smuggle those goods out of the estate. The quantity of items stolen is too large to have been done alone." The Duchess's mother sighed. "Those two are loyal servants. They have supported us through difficult times. Dismissing them is not something that can be done lightly." Chloe replied, "That's what makes their dishonesty even more unforgivable. If Elisa truly valued the trust you placed in her, she would never have done such things behind your back. If this continues, the amount of money lost will only grow larger. If you ignore this matter, madam, those two will only commit more serious offenses, and it will cause even greater harm to the family." The mother interrupted Chloe, her voice laced with irritation. "Why do you insist on making my life more difficult by bringing up these matters? And why do you keep calling me madam as if we are complete strangers? You are married into this family after all." Chloe looked puzzled. "So, may I call you mother then?" She frowned. "That doesn't seem quite appropriate either." The mother stood up, intending to leave. "Let's end our conversation here. I will discuss this matter with Damien when he returns home and make a decision afterward. You will have to eat lunch alone. I have no appetite right now. Shall I bring your meal to your room?" Chloe asked. "I said I have no appetite. You know I don't want to be around you." but skipping meals isn't good for your health. The mother immediately shouted, "Can you be silent instead of responding to everything I say?" She left the room, visibly upset. "Hey, she can really drive someone crazy sometimes," Chloe muttered, left alone with nothing to do but hang her head. Dusk had fallen over the This estate. It was now dinner time, and Chloe was being served by the maid. "Please call me if you need anything," the maid said respectfully before leaving. Looking at the dry steak and the frightening silence of the dining room, Chloe had no appetite and sighed wearily. "I guess I've made myself hated." Indeed, she was all alone at dinner. "I heard the Duchess wants to fire Mrs. Elisa, and she's only been here for a week. This is why people must be careful when choosing a bride." Chloe overheard the servants whispering. She remained silent. Everything on her plate tasted bland. She thought about her father back home, Jules's journey, Alice's reply, and the Duke. When will the Duke return? Will things get better when he does? Chloe wondered. She shook her head vigorously to dispel the mocking face and cynical smile in her mind. No, definitely not, she thought. Frustrated, she stabbed her fork into the steak, as if cornering people was a family tradition in the household. She sighed and muttered, "I don't know who's worse, the mother or the son. It seems you've had quite an interesting conversation." A familiar voice suddenly spoke. Chloe was startled to hear the Duke's voice. He was standing right behind her, looking at her gently. "Mumbling to yourself like this isn't like you. I must have made you very lonely by leaving like that," he said. Chloe stood up, looking at him in surprise. The Duke suddenly opened the dining room door. The mother's excited voice echoed through the room. "Damien, my dear son." She approached him lovingly. "Am I dreaming? You should have informed us that you were coming home." Damien gently replied, "I returned early because I missed you." "Oh my, such a sweet talker." Chloe felt a bit uncomfortable with this overly emotional display. However, Damien was very gentle and affectionate with his mother. He rubbed her warm hand on his cheek to retain her scent and show his affection. Suddenly, he glanced at Chloe. "Returning home quickly has made me a bit hungry. I think I should find something to eat." His mother responded warmly, "Of course, I'll ask Mrs. Dawn to prepare something for you right away." Damien replied, "No need, mother. There's plenty of food on the table already." Chloe hesitated, glancing at the nearby plate of food. Damien looked at his mother and said, "Have them prepare another meal." Soon, a large amount of food was laid out in front of them. The Duke asked his wife, "So, are you happy here while I've been away?" Chloe replied, "Of course, really, yes. Everyone is very kind, so I feel comfortable." The Duke smiled. "It's good to hear you say that." He cut a piece of steak and put it in his mouth but immediately spit it out, angrily throwing the knife and fork down. "This is disgusting. Not fit to be called food," his mother exclaimed in shock. "Damien?" The Duke wiped his mouth, cursing, "Damn it. Summon the doctor immediately." His mother became anxious. "Damien, what's wrong? Why do you need a doctor?" He replied, "Because the family doctor has failed to ensure your health. I want to send him packing immediately." "My dear, I'm perfectly fine." "What nonsense are you talking about? The fact that you have eaten such dreadful food without complaint shows that your sense of taste has serious issues," the Duke said, holding his mother's hand with a sorrowful expression. She pushed his hand away. "There's nothing wrong with my taste, Damien. Don't blame the doctor and forget about punishing him." He coldly asked, "Are you sure? The steak is tough, the vegetables are dry and shriveled, the soup is clearly made from leftovers, and the wine is completely unsuitable to serve at a family table. Are you telling me you know this?" Damien tightly gripped the knife in his hand. "Fine, then call the chef here." A moment later, the head chef and the servants arrived in the dining room. The chef nervously said, "We really don't understand how the leftover food for the poor ended up being served here." "The poor?" the Duke growled, causing the servants behind him to tremble with fear. The chef continued, "Yes, sir. It seems that those responsible for preparing the table made this mistake." The offenders immediately bowed deeply and loudly pleaded, "We have committed a grave offense. Please, forgive us, sir." The Duke Damien spoke angrily. "Do you think you will live after insulting my family like this? Throw them into the dungeon and tear them apart limb by limb." Chloe quickly intervened. "My lord, it's just a meal. Please overlook this minor mistake." Damien sighed. "Oh, my lady, this is food meant for the poor. Does it look like something fit for human consumption?" He sternly reprimanded. I have clearly instructed you on your responsibilities as a duchess. Do you not understand the meaning of my words? Sitting here and eating this garbage without protest is an insult to my honor. You may come from a humble family, but you should know these basic things. Chloe clenched her fists and replied, I apologize for my carelessness, but as your lady and the woman of this house, I ask you to restrain yourself and show kindness to them. Give them a chance to serve a proper dinner suitable for the Thys family. The dinner eventually passed peacefully, and somehow, Chloe managed to spare the lives of the servants. She unconsciously grabbed the bed sheets as she recalled Damien's words afterward. I fear I must relent if that's what you want. You are truly a generous woman. She collapsed onto the bed from exhaustion. What a long day. I'm relieved not to have witnessed their heads roll. My stomach is already churning. There was a knock at the door, followed by the fearful voice of a maid. Madam, the Duke wishes to see you in his private room. Chloe thought to herself, what does he want at this hour? She replied to the maid, tell the Duke I will be there as soon as I am ready. As soon as you are ready? What preparations could you possibly need to make? Damien said, and strode into the room. Neither elegant dresses nor formal attire are necessary at this hour, he declared, his voice cutting through the air. Chloe hurriedly tried to cover herself. I'll meet you in your room as soon as I change, so please give me a moment, she pleaded. The Duke leaned against the bedpost, crossing his arms with a sly smile. I told you, there's no need for elegance. Just come to me as you are. Chloe frowned in exasperation. I can't stand this man, she thought, grabbing her cane and quietly stepping off the bed to retrieve her shawl. She couldn't move without her cane. It wasn't easy at all. Without it, I'll fall flat on the floor, she said irritably. Is that what you want to see? Damien chuckled. I imagine that would be quite a charming sight, he teased, before stepping off the bed himself and extending his hand to her. Now, shall we go to my room, my dear wife? In the Duke's chamber, Chloe sat on the sofa, her curiosity piqued. It's very late. Do you have an urgent matter that requires my assistance? She asked. Damien responded slyly. What do you think could happen between a husband and wife at this hour? Chloe's brow furrowed. Could he be referring to what we left unfinished on our wedding night? She wondered, her heart suddenly racing at the thought. She clutched her shawl tightly around her. Damien watched her, amused by her flushed cheeks and averted gaze. He smirked, knowing exactly what she was thinking. I intend to reward you for your steadfast duties as the Duchess, he said. Chloe was puzzled. I don't think I've done anything significant, the Duke replied. You've helped me get rid of Elisa and Robinson. She was taken aback. You knew about their deceitful actions? Damien shrugged. I love my mother, and I know how attached she was to those two, so I turned a blind eye to their dirty deeds. He looked at her playfully. Why the shocked face? Does my love for my mother surprise you that much? Chloe turned away, flustered. No, not really, she stammered. He continued. Despite her erratic and immature behavior, she's still the woman who gave birth to me. For now, she'll spend some time resting at the Southern Villa. As you can see, she's just heartbroken over Ellie and Robbie's dismissal. Changing the scenery and breathing fresh air will do her good. As he spoke, he lifted a small box. In the meantime, you'll adjust better to life here. Chloe was surprised, wondering if this man was showing kindness towards her. Damien placed the white gift box, neatly tied with a ribbon and adorned with a gemstone, on the table before him. He spoke, open it. Chloe followed his instruction and discovered inside a leg brace designed to help her walk without the cane. She was taken aback as the Duke continued. I thought a more practical gift would be better than that cane. You seem accustomed to its inconvenience. Once you get used to this device, you can walk comfortably without any support. Try it on for me. Chloe closed the box lid. I appreciate the gift, but it's up to the recipient to decide whether to use it or not. I'll try it another time. In her mind, the image of the dead snake and the broken cane often haunted her nightmares. I don't want to be seen hobbling and falling, she thought. Damien's tone sharpened. Is that what you mean? Then I suppose it was also your decision to invite the servant up to the cabin for a rendezvous? Chloe was startled. You had us followed? Damien replied. When you're a member of this family, you hear all sorts of news, whether you want to or not. What was your purpose in giving him more than a servant deserves? You even brought him to my domain. Chloe tried to explain. Gilles is a loyal servant who has worked for my family since he was a child. That's all, Damien retorted. Elisa cared for me since I was born, yet she still betrayed our trust. The atmosphere between them became tense and cold. Despite her frustration, Chloe humbled herself. "I wish you would stop insulting me," she said quietly. The Duke responded, "I'm not insulting you, just giving you advice. Your loyal servant still hasn't left the estate. If someone discovers him lingering here, what do you think people will whisper behind your back?" Chloe became flustered. "Jules hasn't returned to the estate? Why?" Damien suddenly stood next to her, grabbing her hand. "I can't believe you would abandon your duties as a duchess and disgrace me like this, Chloe. So put on the brace immediately." Feeling powerless, Chloe looked at the device in front of her and reluctantly obeyed. In the Duke's chamber, Chloe fell to the floor with a cry of pain. Damien, seemingly indifferent, knelt down and coldly asked, "Where does it feel uncomfortable?" He reached out to adjust the device. Chloe, suppressing her pain, pushed him away. "Please, don't touch me," she pleaded. Damien pressed on. "Then answer me. I need to know its flaws to fix them," she retorted angrily. "The whole device is uncomfortable because I don't need it. It only causes me more pain." The Duke responded, "It will help you a lot if you get used to it. It will take some time and effort." Suddenly, he noticed a strange tone in her voice. "Chloe, are you crying?" The Duke gently brushed his hand over her flushed cheeks, observing her beautiful face tormented by pain. Chloe recoiled from his touch. "Why would I cry?" she asked. Damien smirked. "Right, crying like a child is not fitting for a duchess." He lifted her skirt and caressed her thigh. Chloe gasped in fear. "Your Grace, you truly are like a demon." Damien leaned in close to her beautiful face and responded slyly, "But you haven't yet seen how much of a demon I can be." The comic Betrayal of Dignity, Volume 3. What do you feel now? I feel resentment. I don't believe you. I am deeply upset. Let me ask you once more time. How do you feel? Thump, thump, thump. Chloe's heart pounded as if it would leap out of her chest. She clenched her hands, trying to suppress it. My heart is beating painfully so fast." Damien slowly loosened the device on her leg. "Is your whole body growing hot as if there are embers burning within you? Is your blood flowing so rapidly that you are unable to control your breathing, and your heart feels as if it might burst from your chest?" Chloe blushed and answered, "Yes, and that is precisely why I feel such resentment." Amid Chloe's erratic heartbeat, Damien gave her warm kisses. It seemed he could no longer escape this girl. "Tell me, Chloe, how does it feel to kiss the man you compared to a devil?" Damien asked. Chloe moaned, "Please allow me to return to my room." He became sad. "I suppose I must oblige if that is what you wish." The next day at this residence, the voice of the retinue discussing could be heard when mentioning that the railway would soon be placed in the Verdier territory. They believed it was a wedding gift from the Duke to his wife. "Do you see that as a problem?" "Of course not. Haha, I was just surprised to see you being such a devoted husband." Chloe heard these words and only felt troubled. Fortunately, they quickly changed the subject to talk about the Duchy of Carter. "Even though they have declared an end to the war, we cannot be sure that they won't stab us in the back. They could restart the war at any moment by taking advantage of their geographical position. You should give them a memorable lesson, Your Grace. In fact, you may need to make a decision soon." Damien glanced at where Chloe was sitting. "I want to hear my wife's opinion." The spoon in Chloe's hand suddenly halted. The eyes of all the guests focused on her. "I'm not someone with extensive knowledge of politics and diplomacy," Chloe said. A man spoke up. "Of course, a noble lady from an esteemed family like yourself wouldn't need to worry about these issues." Damien continued. "However, I know the people of Swannon are fed up with war." "Perhaps so, but will conquering the duchy ultimately benefit our people?" Damien finished speaking. People started whispering to each other. A guy with green hair looked at her and smiled friendly. Clutching her dress tightly, Chloe thought, "Is he trying to humiliate me in front of these men? If that is the case, I refuse to simply go along with it." Thinking, Chloe then boldly responded, "It would be most ideal to sign a peace treaty. Bloodshed must be avoided at all costs, especially when it is possible to achieve peace by means of diplomacy." That is little more than name optimism. Promises are broken more often than they are kept. There are ways to ensure they will not violate treaty. How do you figure? The kingdom values ties of blood. Chloe replied, "There are many possible approaches. Signing a peace treaty at all costs to avoid bloodshed, especially when peace can be achieved through diplomacy." Count Weiss sneered. That's more than naive optimism. Promises are more often broken than kept. Damien pondered. A political marriage, a typical arrangement. This could be effective, but the duchy has only one heir, a son, while the royal family of Swanen has no princess. Chloe responded. Swanen has the Grand Prince Johannes, and the Duchy of Quarter has 3 unmarried sisters. Hearing this, the guests at the dining table whispered and laughed mockingly. Suddenly, Damien burst into loud laughter. Ha ha, ha. Johannes. Oh, Johannes. Chloe still didn't understand what was happening. She frowned, thinking to herself. It seemed like they were subtly mocking her. Count Wise cleared his throat. Being married off to the Grand Prince is indeed too horrifying to imagine. It seems, my lady, that you haven't updated yourself with the news from the Red Veil, have you? Chloe immediately remembered that newspaper, the same publisher of the scandal between the Duke and Marchioness Isabella. A guest appeared alarmed. Lord Wise, what makes you mention the Red Veil? Where are your manners? Damien smiled and replied, Oh, it's all right. I'm very curious to know if my wife has read the Red Veil yet. His gaze seemed to strip away her defenses. From her expression, it appeared she had indeed read it. Chloe coldly responded, just by chance. I don't pay much attention to it, as it's just an expensive tabloid. She stood up, intending to leave. I'll request the dessert to be served. Please continue your discussion at leisure. Count Wise, amused, whispered, Haha, she truly is an extraordinary woman. I can understand why the Duke rushed into this marriage so hastily. The man beside intervened. Lord Wise, if you are enamored with your former superior's wife, you will get yourself into big trouble. I'm not enamored in a romantic sense, of course. What I feel is respect, he replied. Chloe sighed in exasperation. They truly are the worst lot. As night fell and everything was quiet, there was a loud bang on the door, followed by a distress call. My lady, my lady. Chloe opened the door and asked, What is it? Suddenly, she was grabbed by a hand and heard a loud shout, My lady. Startled, Chloe found herself facing a woman who was panting heavily with an extremely worried expression. What are you doing here, Eliza? Chloe asked. The woman panted heavily in front of Chloe, likely having run all the way. The maid, upon seeing Eliza, panicked. Oh my God, Mrs. Eliza, don't let yourself be seen here. If the Duke finds out. Eliza angrily brushed off the maid's hand. Let go of me. Do you know how long I've worked here? I've dedicated my entire life to serving this family. Chloe spoke up. Calm down, Eliza. Now tell me why you are here. Eliza appeared frightened. It's because of my nephew. The boy has a high fever and is unconscious. He even mumbles nonsense in his delirium. Please, allow me to see the family doctor, my lady. Chloe thought to herself, could the boy have the same illness she had as a child? She tapped her cane on the floor and commanded the maid, Go call the doctor immediately. The maid anxiously responded, But I can't do that without the Duke's permission. Chloe's voice turned icy. Do you want to disturb his sleep at this hour? Or have you forgotten that I am the mistress of this castle? The maid panicked and cried out, I will call the doctor immediately. As the maid hurriedly ran off, Chloe turned to Eliza. Now, you need to carry me to your house. Treating a fever is a race against time. We must hurry. At a wooden house, Eliza shouted, What are you doing to the boy? On the sickbed, a boy shivered uncontrollably, crying out from the cold as he tried to remove his outer clothes. Can't you hear me? The boy will freeze to death. Chloe calmly replied, Go outside and get me some snow. I need to bring down his fever. She then opened the lid of the bottle she was holding. Eliza, both frightened and angry, said, If anything happens to the boy, I will never forgive you. Chloe responded, You can resent me all you want later. But if you don't want your nephew to spend the rest of his life with a limp like mine, you need to trust me now. After some time, the boy's fever had subsided, and he drifted into sleep. The doctor that Chloe had called examined the boy and praised her for acting promptly. Eliza, crying, thanked Chloe. My lady, how can I ever repay you? Chloe comforted her. I didn't save the boy to earn your gratitude. I'm just glad he will be all right. Suddenly, the wooden door swung open. The Duke, having heard the news, had come to find Chloe. Eliza appeared alarmed. Your Grace. He cast a cold gaze and ordered, Come out. Under the snow-covered forest, Chloe recounted the entire incident to Damien. Eliza was supposed to leave the territory 2 days ago, but she couldn't because her nephew was gravely ill. The money she had embezzled from the estate was stolen by her son and squandered on gambling. The child is innocent, It's the adults who deserve punishment. Besides, this shows she has dedicated her entire life to serving the family. She is no different from family. Chloe glanced at Damien's reaction. He sighed deeply, lost in thought. Chloe, embarrassed, apologized. I called the doctor without your permission. I didn't want to disturb your sleep. I'm sorry. Damien suddenly stopped walking. Chloe, I didn't ask for an explanation. You don't need to justify your actions or apologize to me. But I want to know one thing. Why did you decide to help her? I heard you even wrote a recommendation letter for her. Chloe hesitated, and then replied, she seemed to need help. After dedicating her life to working at the castle, it would be difficult for her to receive a positive reference from anywhere else. Damien coldly asked, isn't it because you wanted to absolve yourself of guilt for having dismissed her? No, it's not that, Chloe replied. Then is it out of pity? Because her son gambled away all the money. Damien continued, that's not the reason either, she responded. So, is it because you always have compassion for your servants? Chloe, growing frustrated, snapped, Your Grace, can you give a clear reason for everything you've done? Damien, with a smug look, replied, of course, almost always. He tilted his head and insisted, then tell me, what would you do instead of questioning to get close to someone? Blushing, she turned away. I just want to get to know them naturally. When you quietly observe someone, you learn things about them without interrogation. Damien noticed Chloe's fingers had turned red from the cold. He took off his cloak and draped it over her. I'm thinking of giving you another gift. Chloe looked at him, surprised. What is it? I'm considering hiring Gilles Watt for the vacant stable master position. He's currently doing manual labor at the train station instead of returning to the Verdier estate, so this would be a welcome offer. Damien hesitated for a moment, then inquired, do you want to keep him by your side then? No, Chloe replied cheerfully. He is a trustworthy person. I assure you of that with my life. The Duke remained silent as she continued. There has never been anything between us that shouldn't have happened. He chuckled softly and stepped closer to her. If that's true, Chloe, then kiss me to prove to me that your relationship with that servant is as pure as these snowflakes. In that case, I am willing to hire him, Damien added straightforwardly. Chloe declined firmly. I have no desire to kiss you, Duke Damien, as he continued teasing her. It's a shame that poor boy will soon be leaving on the train, but let Gilles choose where he wants to settle. The Duke turned serious. I am a devoted husband, Chloe. The less trust you have in me, the less choice that boy will have in where he is welcomed in this realm. Chloe gripped her fur coat tightly, lamenting, what a misfortune this kingdom is. She pleaded, please, your grace, reconsider. Damien chuckled, but complied with her request nonetheless. Suddenly, he pulled her forcefully towards him. Chloe blushed uncontrollably as she involuntarily kissed the man. The Duke was both surprised and amused by her bold action, embracing the girl closely. He stopped her from attempting to flee, then continued to give Chloe a kiss more passionate than ever before. Chloe's disabled leg began to tremble as they released each other. She still blushed with embarrassment. Well done, Chloe, Damien said. The truth is, the most passionate kiss you gave me was for someone else's benefit. It made me both deeply satisfied and profoundly offended. The next morning, Chloe sat writing a letter to her father in her private room at the castle. To my beloved father, Lord Verdier, please forgive me for not writing earlier. I have been quite preoccupied as of late. It is cold enough here that the river has frozen over, though I have hardly had the time to notice. The employees of Birch Castle have been nothing but polite and welcoming. Is my guardian, and the master of the castle has done his best to help me adjust life here. Holding the letter, Chloe contemplated writing falsehoods, which wasn't easy. There is one more piece of news that might surprise you. You mentioned is your last correspondence. That you had been upset by Gilles' sudden decision to leave his post at the Verdier Castle. It seems that he was quite taken with the Thys estate, which he had visited for a short time. His Grace has offered Gilles a fine position at the Birch Castle, which I dare believe was done out of consideration for me. As you can tell, I am being treated with the utmost generosity and respect, so you need not worry. I wish you the best of health until the next time I write. With a heart full of longing, Chloe Verdier, daughter of Thomas Verdier. That night, the Duke called Chloe into the billiards room. Tonight, I made some excellent shots. I'll soon score over 100 points, he said. Chloe bluntly replied, you just broke a rule. You lost a point. Damien gave her a sly look. I remember you saying you didn't know the rules last time. If you lied to avoid playing with me, I'd be disappointed. Chloe, feeling annoyed, asked, why did you call me in the middle of the night? If you want to check if I've fulfilled my duties, everything is fine. My relationships with the servants have improved. Suddenly, Chloe noticed something in front of her. Take this cue stick, Chloe. Puzzled, she asked, do you want to play a match with me? Yes, he confirmed. And what are the stakes? She asked. Stakes? Damien echoed. Chloe replied, I don't like playing without a wager. It's not fun otherwise. Damien became excited. You always surprise me. What do you want to wager? Chloe adjusted her cue stick as she spoke. If I win, you must stop calling me into your room in the middle of the night. And if I win? Damien asked. Chloe hesitated, not having considered the possibility of losing. It was a bold move. Damien chuckled. If I win, I'll take something from you that I want. Chloe blushed but tried to appear strong. Do as you wish. The white ball shot forward from the strike. That's a foul, Chloe said, frustrated. No way. Damien, amused, replied, your eyes deceived you. How unfortunate. He looked at his wife and thought, I know she's an extraordinary woman in many ways, but once again, she's exceeded my expectations. The Duke involuntarily licked his lips as his desire to possess her surged. Do you know the essence of this game is to deceive your opponent into making mistakes? He asked. I've heard of that, Chloe responded. In 2 days, a special group of guests will visit the estate. I hope you will warmly welcome them as the Duchess. Additionally, the Marchioness Isabella will be attending. She's quite a discerning woman, so I advise you to be meticulous in your preparations, Damien said, as the white ball continued to roll across the billiard table along with the colored balls. This time, however, Chloe seemed to be at a disadvantage. Oh, dear, it looks like you've lost, Damien remarked, his voice filled with mock concern. Chloe's face turned to one of disbelief. What did he just say? Marchioness Isabella? Does this man think he's doing? Damien has won this game. Now, Chloe, it's time for you to give me what I want. What could it be? I want your lips, Chloe. Chloe coldly replied, that is a sincere request from the bottom of my heart. Damien played with a lock of her hair, teasing. Never have I been more earnest in my life. What's wrong? You are the one who suggested a wager. A thought flashed through his mind. He wanted to see her angry Chloe, to see all the emotions she had always suppressed. He wanted her to release and explode them. Chloe turned to face him. Your Grace, I have never felt such contempt for a person, Damien responded before her lips touched his. What an honor. Is that all you wanted to say? No, there's more, the Duke slyly said. Go on, I'm listening. He thought to himself, yes, Chloe, scream at me. Ask how I could possibly insult you like this. Don't hold it in. Show me what you have kept pent up inside. Chloe clenched the edge of her dress, but then she let go. Damien frowned as he looked at the woman before him. If you have nothing more to teach me, may I leave now? Tears seemed to well up in Chloe's eyes, but she held back her painful emotions. Damien quietly watched the door slowly close. He suddenly laughed at himself. It seems I underestimated my wife's ability to annoy me. A few days passed. The castle of Boss received many guests, including the Marquis Isabella. Chloe glanced at her. Welcome, Lady Isabella. She looked shy. Thank you. I was worried my presence would upset you, Chloe responded. You are the Duke's close friend. How could I be upset? Isabella put on a pitiful face. I don't want to attend a party that makes me feel so wretched. The people around tried to comfort her. She continued to cry and apologize. I'm sorry. I just feel the world is too cruel. Chloe was fed up with Isabella's fake sorrow. Pretending to be pitiful. She doesn't know that her sorrow can't compare to the pain I endure pretending to be friendly to my husband's rumored mistress. Chloe tried to pacify her by suggesting she rest in a room. But Isabella exaggerated even more, shouting as if she were being attacked by the Duchess. My presence has indeed upset the lady of the house. I know I'm not welcome here, but this successfully caused other guests to whisper about the Duchess's jealousy. What's going on here? Damien stepped in from behind. Your Grace, all the female guests were embarrassed by the chaotic scene. Chloe calmly explained, the Marchioness is feeling unwell, so I suggested she return to the castle to rest. Your Grace, the Duke replied. Oh, I see. Isabella, still feigning shyness, continued. It's my fault for knowing how widows and divorcees are regarded in this empire. Another woman chimed in dramatically. Oh my, I can't believe anyone would think that way. It's not your fault your husband passed away. Besides, an outdoor party like this can be very challenging for someone from Swan. Oh, come to think of it, I'm not feeling well either. Is the food all right? My tea has gone cold. One after another, it seemed like they were all attacking Chloe. They didn't seem to accept someone who was both disabled and from a lower status family becoming the Duchess. Damien approached, offering to call a carriage for Isabella. However, her attitude remained insincere, as she kept mentioning how she didn't belong here. Each comment seemed aimed at provoking Chloe. Chloe stood up and firmly said, "No, if I were upset, I wouldn't have invited you in the first place." Damien smiled slightly as he heard his wife explain, "If you feel better now, I hope your presence will bring us joy. But if you feel uncomfortable, please rest." That's what I meant. The red-haired woman hesitated immediately, and so did the other guests. Chloe glanced over at the group of nobles, signaling them to back off. They quickly covered up their intentions. "Thank you for your concern. I have no intention of leaving early." Chloe turned directly to face Isabella. "What do you wish to do, Lady Isabella?" Isabella lowered her head and replied softly, "I feel better now. I'm sorry for disrupting the party." Chloe sternly responded, "Thank you for understanding. We will be serving pudding soon. They were made according to each person's taste, and I hope everyone will enjoy them. It's also Lady Isabella's favorite dessert." Taking advantage of the moment, Damien praised Chloe. "You are so thoughtful, my wife. Thank you for kindly entertaining our guests." Hearing these words, Chloe was infuriated. She turned and sarcastically said, "You are the most welcomed one, Duke." The Duke looked bewildered as he watched his wife quietly leave. Behind her, Isabella continued to cover her face, pretending to cry. But beneath the facade was a completely different person, silently bearing a grudge. Meanwhile, at the ice rink, some gossiping women started talking about Chloe and Isabella. They believed the Marchioness had every right to feel her things were taken away because she met the Duke before Chloe. If it weren't for their family's business, they wouldn't have come to skate at the castle. Isabella cast a sharp look at the ice rink below, where the Duke was pushing Chloe's sled. She smirked, thinking about how she supposedly had her rightful place taken. What a baseless assumption. I have no intention of losing anything, she thought. On the ice rink, the Duke commented as he pushed the sled. "The weather here is wonderful, isn't it?" "Yes, it is," Chloe replied. "Do you feel any interest in the growing hostility among the ladies?" he asked. Chloe replied candidly, "Thanks to you, everything is going smoothly." As for Isabella, I don't think she will allow herself to be easily defeated. "But you have exceeded my expectations," Chloe sighed. "If I let myself be disrespected in front of all the servants, I will certainly lose my dignity as the Duchess. And if that happens, I know it will negatively affect you, and how's this? Therefore, I cannot just sit idly by." Damien smiled. "My beloved wife, do you not resent me?" Chloe replied, "Even if I did, I wouldn't be foolish enough to show it in front of you." "Oh, why is that?" "Because my life is in your hands. I don't want to be left on a frozen lake for defying you." Damien chuckled at her words. "No one has ever made me feel more intrigued than you." Chloe blushed slightly at the Duke's expression and quickly turned away. She seemed to sense a hint of sincerity behind that smile. Below the mansion's pillars, Damien felt annoyed as a man begged him for some private time to discuss an issue. The man rambled on, apologizing if his wife had been disrespectful during the tea party. Damien, indifferent to his sincerity, looked away, focusing instead on Chloe, who was waiting for him on the ice rink. This made him a bit impatient. "You came to see me just to say this?" "I sincerely apologize, Your Grace." Damien unconsciously tapped his finger as he thought deeply. What is Chloe thinking right now? If I could know her thoughts, would it ease this intense longing? I want to understand her perspective on the world. I want to analyze every cell in her body and understand how her mind works. I want to be the only one in the world who truly sees her. What is this desire I am feeling? Am I longing for Chloe Veer to love me? He cleared his throat, mumbling, "I must be crazy." The man in front of him brought him back to reality. "Your Grace." Damien coldly walked away. "Listen, Lord Spencer. If you want forgiveness, Have your wife apologize to her directly. Don't waste my time with such trivial matters. The man was left speechless and frightened, taking a step back. I must leave before someone says something even harsher to my wife. Suddenly, he froze when he heard a loud noise and a frantic scream. Lady Thys, she's in danger over there. Chloe was struggling to get back on the cracked ice. However, the weight was too much for the ice to hold, and it was breaking apart and floating on the lake. She was quickly swallowed by the water and sank to the depths. Damien shouted, Chloe. Everything seemed to fade and become cold. Am I going to die? Chloe began to feel faint. If I truly am going to die, I want to see them again, my dear old father, my little sister, Jules, and even him. Just one last time. Chloe's tears mingled with the cold water, carrying away her longing and regrets for her loved ones. In that critical moment, a pair of hands gently embraced her, pulling her up from the freezing, dark lake. Damien did everything he could to revive her, desperate for her to breathe again. Coughing and sputtering, she expelled all the water from her lungs. He had never been more terrified, watching someone nearly drown right in front of him. His breath became rapid with anger and frustration, his eyes growing sharp, as if facing an enemy on the battlefield.